Looking this Advent season here at Sunny Slope, we're looking at the theme of Christmas according to Paul, which means we're looking at some of the different things, the different statements and theological descriptions that Paul gives us about the identity of Jesus. One of the places in the New Testament where Paul talks about that is actually in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 9. And that is our text for today. So I'm going to put that up on the screen and we're going to start our walk through the text. By this point, hopefully we've had a chance at least once to read through the text. The first step in doing any kind of Bible study is to read the text through. And you give it a good reading. You're looking just for questions that come to your mind. You're looking for general thoughts and reactions. I think it's always good to start by asking, what does the text tell us about what's wrong with us? And what does God do to meet that need? And how does God want us to live? What is our response? Those are good things to start with. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to break the text down. We're going to start to dig a little bit more deeply into the text. And one of the things that we do to do that is we want to break it up into the phrases, the individual pieces of the whole text. And that helps us to follow and to identify the flow of thought and main ideas. We're not looking yet for repeated words. That comes a little bit later. So we're going to start here. We got the text here. We're going to start here. We want you to know, brothers. Well, what do we want to know? About the grace of God. What about that grace that has been given among the churches of Macedonia? So we want you to know about these churches. But more than that, it's about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of in Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy, and we actually see multiple things, and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. So that actually all seems to fit pretty nicely together. So what's the main idea starting to emerge? Paul is saying to the Corinthians, we want you to know about the generosity of these churches that's a result of God's grace. There's obviously a lot more we're going to say about that, but that's the general idea. How does Paul qualify that? Well, for they gave, who's the they? Well, we already know it's the churches of Macedonia. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord. So I always want to line up when I see kind of the same wording here. I just want to line it up like that. Their means of their own accord. Now we have a participle here, where it says begging us, and I'm not quite sure where does that fit. I would suspect it fits under they gave. So actually, I'm going to move this around just a little bit. They gave, according to the means as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord. So how did they give? Well, they gave begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this was not as we, so then when you get the word not, then it's sometimes followed up by the word but, and that's a contrastive statement. So not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then obviously first and then fit together. First to the Lord, then by the will of God to us. So maybe we want to just kind of clarify how that works. So we line up the word to the Lord and to us first, then by the will of God. So first to the Lord, then to us by the will of God. Accordingly, we urge Titus that as he had started, as and so, those often fit together, as he had started, so he should complete. And I'll line up started and complete because I know that those are meant to stand together. He should complete among you this act of grace. But as you excel in everything, and this is an interesting phrase because we know that the Corinthians were quite boastful. That's a little bit of history that helps to know. They were a boastful church about their own spiritual gifts. And so Paul is zeroing in on that, which that's going to come in a little later. As you excel in everything in faith, and then he gives a list of it in speech, in knowledge, in all earnestness, and in our love for you. So there's quite a list. Everything, faith, speech, knowledge, earnestness, and love. And then this kind of is as you excel, see that you excel. So there's again that parallel statement. We'll keep that sort of linked. See that you excel in this act of grace also. That's a powerful statement, which we'll come back to a little later. I say this not as a command, and there's the word not and but, not as a command, but to prove. How are you going to prove? By the earnestness of others. To move that over just a little bit. But to prove that your love also is genuine. How do you prove it? By the earnestness of others. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that, and here's where he's explaining that grace, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor. And again, I want to keep ideas together here. Though he became, so I'll do it like this, I think. Oops. Though he was rich, he became poor, so that, by, he became, so that you, and then again, it's a statement that, by his poverty, might become rich. Just like that. So, we've kind of broken this down. There's obviously different ways that you could do this. I'm not going to suggest that the way that I've just done it is the only way to do it, but we're just looking for connections between the different phrases and the different words. We're looking to see how this is all thematically linked. And once we have that done, our next step is to start looking and digging more deeply into that. What do these words mean? What words do we see emphasized? How do we see these phrases all linked together? And that's what we'll do next. Welcome back. We've done the first part of our study here of 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And what that is to lay out all of the different clauses and the different parts of the text so that we can begin to see how each of the different phrases and sentences all relate to one another. Now we get to jump into what I think is, for me, it's kind of my favorite part of studying because it's sort of like playing in the sandbox. You get to just dig in and explore the words, you sort of get to get free reign over the text. Well, hey there. We're back. We've set our text aside for a few days, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, and now we're picking it up again, and we're about to do what is my favorite part of studying a text, which is the real work of exegesis. We really get to dig in and study a passage. We get to look at the meaning of different words. We get to ask questions. In some ways, it's like playing in the sandbox. You get to just explore whatever it is that God brings to your mind, and hopefully in the process of doing that, in the process of learning about the different words and the background of the text and the context and everything, then the meaning of the passage becomes clear. So Let me put up the screen and we're going to jump right in. So here we are. We'll start with this. We want you to know this is maybe not a huge thing, but whenever you see that, that's it has a name. It's called a disclosure formula. And I just put that in there. I draw your attention to that just because it was a letter writing convention in Paul's day. And so sometimes you'll hear Paul say, I want you to know, or I do not want you to be ignorant, or something along those lines. So I'll just point that out. I'm not sure that it has any major significance for our text, but there it is. One of the things from our first reading through is that we're gonna notice that Paul comes back. Oops, I wanted that to be yellow. Let's try that again. Paul's going to come back again and again to the idea of grace in this text and generosity, and so we want to draw attention to that when we find it. So I'm going to just start by highlighting the word grace here. Um, the idea, the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. So what about those churches in Macedonia? Well, here's what Paul tells us. A severe test of affliction, but their abundance of joy, poverty, and wealth. So you can kind of see each of these phrases are opposites. So affliction and joy, right? Those two go together. Poverty and wealth and of generosity. So there's clearly a contrast here that Paul wants to bring our attention to concerning these churches in Macedonia. And we're going to see that's going to become important. I happen to know that let's pick a different, let's use red here. We're going to highlight the word um, poverty in red, and then we're going to highlight the word, let's use blue for the word wealth. That's going to come up a couple of different times. Um, Interestingly, the word grace and give are often, oh, now I can't find my word give though. Let's put that, there we go. Giving and grace are pretty closely related. And I bring that up just because um, the theme that Paul is developing here is God's grace and how it leads to our giving and our generosity. So we're just going to pay attention to that. Um, so they gave according to their means. Who's they? Well, the churches of Macedonia. They gave according to their means and beyond their means. Maybe we'll highlight that word means, just not sure how significant it is, but we'll highlight it anyways. Their means, according to their means. Uh, don't think I've seen it any other times yet. But I thought I just saw, oh yeah, there, the word gave. So since we're kind of highlighting giving and grace, I'm gonna, yeah, grace. Yeah. So, anyways, you can kind of see how this idea of giving and generosity and grace all tie together. And we haven't done a lot of digging into that yet, but I think that's gonna turn out to be rather significant as we're going to see. All right. So going on, um, as I can testify, begging us earnestly, and here's what's interesting, earnestly for what? For the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And I'm going to just circle this and leave a question mark there because favor sometimes is the same word translated as with closely to the word grace. That might be significant for us later on. So what we're seeing so far is this picture that's emerging, and it's in some ways if you're a kid and you've had siblings and your parent compares you, why can't you be more like your brother? Sometimes that's an uncomfortable comparison. That seems to be a little bit what Paul is doing here. He's talking to the brothers at Corinth, and he's asking, he's wanting them to see the churches of Macedonia as an example. And the example is affliction and joy. In their affliction, they had joy, and in their poverty, they had wealth. And so that's going to become the example for them. So, and then Paul, and here's the word for. For is an explanatory phrase. So here's what they did, And then here's Paul's explanation. They gave according to their means and beyond their means of their own accord. And that's going to be significant. Whoops. Oh man, something just happened there. I think I can fix that easily. Yep. Something um what Paul is getting at here, their own accord. Um ooh, I gotta there we go. Um this is going to come out because Paul seems to be he seems to be concerned that the Corinthians are not being as generous as they ought. They're giving, but there seems to be this undercurrent that they're giving because they're being forced into it or pressured into it. And Paul wants them to be giving like the Macedonians who gave out of their own accord. They did so willingly, even though they had all these reasons not to be generous. I mean, there's suffering and affliction and so on, but they nevertheless still gave. And Paul, so we're going to see that's going to become relevant to us, I think, a little bit later on. Um, they begged us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. By the way, when's the last time that you pleaded with someone to have the opportunity to give? That's pretty remarkable, and it's further remarkable when we remember all of this here, the affliction that they experienced. But they gave themselves first to the work of the Lord, then by the will of God to us. And remember, we separated this out. They gave themselves first to the Lord, then to us by the will of God. Okay, well, here's what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna clear all the drawings. It's a little bit unfortunate, just the way the text is, but we'll remember that means is in green. That rhymes, so maybe that helps. And then grace and giving is in yellow. Poverty is in red. All right. I think that there we go. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna scroll down. Oops. There we go. Now, just so we don't forget, let's go back and highlight some of those things, just so we remember. So poverty and poor, we're going to highlight in red like this. I know there's at least, yeah, there we go. Poverty. There's at least one more. And then we know means is in green, and we know grace and giving is in yellow. I don't think the word means is here anymore. Um, Grace is in yellow. There we go. Grace. Um, I don't think we'd highlighted anything. Uh, I don't think we highlighted the word rich or wealthy in anything, but let's do that. I don't know. What's a color that feels like wealth? I guess green, right? Oh, we already used green. We'll use dark green for rich. So rich, rich. Um, I thought I saw one more, but maybe not. Oh, Grace. There's Grace. Ha. Got that highlighted again. Just like that. Okay. Man, maybe there's more that we're missing, but that's good for now. Okay, so now Paul is going back and he's resuming the story. Accordingly, we urge Titus that as he had started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. And I don't know what that is. Actually, I have an idea, but upon first reading, we might not, we're left with the question, what act of grace had Titus started? And we don't know that yet. That's okay. We'll figure that out as we go along. As you excel in everything. Well, what everything? Well, typical Paul fashion, he's not going to leave that question unanswered. So he's going to go on. Oh, here we go. Dark red. In all these things, and as you excel, and because it's important enough, I'm going to highlight it even. He talks about excelling right there and right there. Um, you excel in all these things. Make sure that you excel in grace also. Now, here's where a little bit of the context is helpful in Paul's relationship with the Corinthian church and the church at Corinth in general. They were a church that was pretty braggy. They liked to boast about how spiritual they were, and in particular, what do they boast about? Well, you probably know where this is going. They boasted about how strong their faith was. They boasted about their speech in terms of like speaking in tongues. They boasted about gifts of knowledge, earnestness, and love, right? You remember 1 Corinthians chapter 13, where Paul has to tell them what true love is like. And he actually goes through some of these same things. If I speak in the tongue of men and of angels, and if I have all knowledge and prophecies, right? So in other words, the Corinthian church were like, they boasted about all of these different things. And Paul says, okay, if you think you're so good in all of these things, how about you practice being good at this as well? Um, and it's a pretty compelling argument if you're a Corinthian and you take a lot of pride in the strength of your faith and your love and all of those other sorts of things. How, Paul is he's closing the deal here, isn't he? You can see pretty well what he's doing. Um, in any case, I think a very powerful argument. Prove the earnestness of others that your love is also genuine. Um, Remember, they've talked about love, they've bragged about love. Paul says, okay, literally put your money where your mouth is. And then and for our purposes at Sunny Slope, this is going to be, this is right. This is the Christmas idea that Jesus Christ, though he was rich, became poor so that by his poverty he might make us rich. I didn't even plan it this way, but look at that Christmas colors. It must be a sign. Um, but this is really what the heart of the Christmas story is all about, at least as Paul views it. It's the idea that through the God giving himself and giving of himself, he becomes poor. He is impoverished. When you give of yourself, by definition, you lose out. I mean, if in terms of a strictly mathematical thing, anytime you give a gift, you are less wealthy because of it. But then the person that you're giving to is more wealthy. And that's what Christmas is. It's the ultimate gift that God gives so that we might have the ultimate riches. So there you have it. There's obviously a lot more here. In some ways, we've got to start digging into some of the context. The next big steps here are to look in some dictionaries, and maybe kind of remind ourselves some of this context stuff. And then we want to be asking the questions, how do we take all this and organize it in a way that makes sense to us? So if we're asking the question, what's Paul's point? If we had to summarize Paul's point in one sentence, what would it be? What does he want us to do? What is the reason for doing it? Why don't we do it? What's the problem? Those are the questions that we begin to ask. We begin to flesh all of those out. And as we do that, then we begin to get a sense of not only what did the passage mean for then and there, but also for here and now. What's that same message for us today? And I hope you'll join us. We'll be looking at this text on December 22nd. I hope you'll be part of our worship service then. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching.